Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast, where we help you become confident English speakers step by step. I'm Jason, your host, and today we're diving into an exciting topic: how to speak English naturally like a native speaker.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, your co-host, and I'm so glad you're here. Speaking English naturally might seem challenging at first, especially if you're a beginner. But don't worry. In today's episode, we're going to break it down into simple, practical tips that you can start using right away.
That's right, Sarah. Many English learners feel nervous when they try to speak, and they often wonder how to make their English sound more fluent, smooth, and, well, natural. In this episode, we're going to show you how to do just that.
We'll talk about what speaking naturally really means, share tips like improving pronunciation, using common phrases, and understanding intonation. Plus, we'll go over some fun exercises you can do at home to practice.
By the end of this podcast, you'll have a clear idea of how to take your English speaking skills to the next level. And most importantly, you'll feel more confident using English in real-life situations.
So, grab a notebook, sit back, and let's get started.
So, Sarah, let's start with a simple question. What does it mean to speak English naturally?
Great question, Jason. Speaking English naturally means communicating in a way that feels relaxed, confident, and easy to understand. It's not just about using the right words, it's about how you say them.
Exactly. It's about matching the rhythm, tone, and style of a native speaker. For example, native speakers often use contractions like I'm instead of I am or don't instead of do not. Small changes like these can make a big difference in how natural you sound.
Right. And it's also about knowing when to pause, when to stress certain words, and how to use expressions or idioms. These things might seem tricky at first, but they're key to sounding natural.
Another important point is the flow of conversation. Native speakers don't just speak, they react. They add little sounds like uh-huh, yeah, or oh really, to show they're listening.
That's so true. And speaking naturally doesn't mean being perfect. Native speakers make mistakes too. They repeat words, change their sentences halfway through, or use fillers like and
So, speaking naturally isn't about trying to be flawless, it's about sounding human. And the good news is that anyone can learn these habits with practice.
Absolutely. In the next section, we'll dive into some practical tips to help you start speaking naturally today. Stay tuned.
All right, now that we know what it means to speak English naturally, let's talk about how to actually do it. Sarah, what's the first tip you'd give to our listeners?
The first tip is to listen to native speakers as much as possible. This could be through podcasts, movies, or even YouTube videos. Pay attention to how they pronounce words, their intonation, and the phrases they use.
That's a great point. Listening is key because it helps you pick up on the natural rhythm of the language. My second tip is to practice speaking out loud. For example, you can repeat lines from movies or TV shows. This technique is called shadowing, where you mimic what you hear as closely as possible.
I love shadowing. Another tip is to focus on using contractions. Instead of saying I cannot, try I can't. Or instead of I am going to, say I'm gonna. This makes your speech sound more relaxed and conversational.
Good one, Sarah. My next tip is to learn and use common phrases or idioms. For example, instead of saying, I'm very happy, you can say, I'm over the moon. It's these little expressions that make your English sound more natural.
Also, don't forget about intonation. English has a musical quality to it. For example, when you're asking a question, your tone usually goes up at the end. Practicing this can really make a difference.
And finally, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Speaking naturally is about progress, not perfection. Every time you practice, you're getting closer to sounding like a native speaker.
That's right. In the next section, we'll talk about common challenges and how to overcome them. Let's keep going.
Now, let's talk about some of the common challenges beginners face when trying to speak English naturally. Sarah, what do you think is one of the biggest obstacles?
I'd say one of the biggest challenges is fear of making mistakes. Many beginners feel embarrassed or nervous about sounding wrong, so they hesitate to speak at all.
That's so true. But here's the thing. Mistakes are part of the learning process. Every native speaker you hear today once made mistakes when they were learning to speak as kids. It's completely normal.
Another challenge is pronunciation. English has some tricky sounds, like the th in words like think or this. If you're not used to these sounds, it can feel frustrating.
Absolutely. And another challenge is trying to translate everything from your native language into English. This can make your sentences sound unnatural. Instead, it's better to think directly in English, even if it feels slow at first.
That's a great point. I'd also add that some beginners struggle with confidence because they compare themselves to fluent speakers. It's important to remember that everyone learns at their own pace.
Yes, and another issue is not having enough opportunities to practice speaking. Without regular practice, it's hard to build the habits needed to sound natural.
The good news is that every one of these challenges has a solution. In the next section, we'll share practical exercises you can do to overcome these obstacles and start speaking more naturally.
Yes, and another issue is not having enough opportunities to practice speaking. Without regular practice, it's hard to build the habits needed to sound natural.
The first one is shadowing, which we mentioned earlier. Find a short clip from a movie, TV show, or podcast, something with clear, natural English. Play a sentence, pause, and repeat it exactly as you hear it. Try to match the tone, rhythm, and pronunciation.
Exactly. Don't let challenges hold you back. Stay with us, and we'll help you take your English to the next level. All right, now let's get into some practical exercises that can help you speak English naturally. These exercises are simple and effective, and the best part is you can do them on your own. Sarah, what's the first exercise you'd recommend?
That's a fantastic exercise. Another one I recommend is practicing dialogues. You can find scripts from movies or create your own. Practice them out loud, imagining you're in a real conversation.
Great tip. Shadowing is one of my favorites because it trains your brain and mouth to mimic natural speech patterns. My next suggestion is recording yourself. Speak on a topic for 1 or 2 minutes, then listen to the recording. Compare it to how native speakers sound and note areas where you can improve.
Don't forget about tongue twisters. They're fun and great for improving pronunciation. For instance, try saying, "She sells seashells by the seashore." It's challenging but really helps with tricky sounds.
Good one, Sarah. I'd also suggest learning one new phrase or idiom every day. Use it in sentences and try saying it multiple times during the day. For example, if you learn break the ice, practice using it in different contexts. Finally, talk to yourself in English throughout the day. Describe what you're doing, plan your day out loud, or even have imaginary conversations. It might feel silly, but it's a powerful way to build fluency.
My first piece of advice is to celebrate small wins. Maybe today you learned a new phrase or you pronounced a difficult word correctly. Those are victories. Recognizing progress, even the small steps, keeps you motivated.
Absolutely. Up next, we'll give you some encouragement to keep going on your language journey. Stay tuned. Now that we've shared some practical exercises, let's talk about something equally important: staying motivated. Learning to speak English naturally takes time, but with consistency, you'll get there. Sarah, what's your advice for beginners who might feel discouraged?
Absolutely. And remember, making mistakes is not a bad thing. It's a sign that you're learning. Every time you try, even if it's not perfect, you're building confidence and improving.
That's a great point. I'd also say, don't compare yourself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace. Instead of focusing on where you think you should be, focus on how far you've already come.
And surround yourself with positivity. Find a friend, teacher, or online community that supports your learning journey. Having people cheer you on makes a big difference.
Another tip is to make learning fun. Watch movies, listen to songs, or play games in English. The more enjoyable the process, the more motivated you'll be to keep practicing.
That's so true. You're on a journey and every step forward matters. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, keep practicing, and remember, you're doing great.
Finally, remind yourself why you're learning English. Is it to travel? To get a better job? To connect with people worldwide? Keeping your goal in mind will help you push through challenges.
We started by explaining what speaking naturally really means, communicating in a way that feels relaxed, confident, and authentic. It's not about being perfect, it's about sounding natural and human.
We believe in you. Keep going, and you'll see amazing results. Next up, let's wrap up this episode with a quick recap of what we've learned today. Well, everyone, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's do a quick recap of what we've learned about speaking English naturally like a native speaker.
We also talked about common challenges, like fear of making mistakes, pronunciation issues, and a lack of practice opportunities. But the good news is that all of these can be overcome with consistent effort.
Then, we shared some tips like listening to native speakers, practicing contractions, using idioms, and focusing on intonation. These small changes can make a big difference in how fluent and natural you sound.
Most importantly, we want you to stay motivated, celebrate your progress, have fun with learning, and remember that every small step takes you closer to your goal.
Exactly. And don't forget the practical exercises we shared: shadowing, recording yourself, practicing dialogues, learning new idioms, and even using tongue twisters. These activities are simple, but very effective.
Thanks for spending your time with us today. Keep practicing, stay confident, and we'll see you in the next episode of the English Learning Podcast.
That's right. You've got this. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you have any questions or tips to share, leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Take care and happy learning!